Hey guys, it's Alex Pierce. In today's video we're going to be talking all about the user interface. So it's going to be tempting to jump into other areas like the 3D viewport, but we are going to be talking about user interface, and I'm going to try my best to stay on topic. So when you first open up Blender, it should look something like this. And the first thing I want to show you is, even if you mess this all up and you don't know where anything's at, you can always go to File, Defaults, Load Factory Settings, and then click again, and it'll load up exactly how it came in. And when you go to File, New, you get other options as well. So if you just wanted to create a new, like for instance, haven't done anything in here, I don't really care about this project, I can just go to New, General. In this case, I'm not going to save, and it'll also bring me back to the default. There are other default files. So for instance, 2D animation, sculpting, VFX, video editing, and if you're doing something very specific, you can choose one of those to start with. But all of these, you can continually add your own workspaces, and you can customize anything and everything. So in general, for me, I typically just start with general and I go from there. But one thing I will say is that you can save your startup file as well. So after you watch this video, you can probably already get a sense of what's going to make the most sense for you, and then you can just sort of strip away what you don't need. And I highly recommend you strip away what you don't need. So for instance, scripting is probably something that you're not going to be wanting to do when you first jump into Blender. So you can go up here, right click, and then delete, and you can get rid of it. And then the next time you open up Blender, if you don't save the default startup file, this is just going to come back. I'll show you. So now it's back. But if I click this, delete, and then I go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File, see how I'm in the compositing tab here? If I go to New, General, it starts on the compositing tab, and the scripting tab is now closed. And again, if you don't want that, you can always go to Defaults, Load Factory Settings, and you're back to normal. So you have these tabs at the top, and they're very helpful. As you can see, they lay out the windows in a lot of different ways that make sense to the context of what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to work in the shading, if you're creating materials and such, you might want to work in the shading tab, animation, rendering, etc. But for me personally, what I like to do is I like to set up my own window. So if you click on this top left button in any of these windows, you can open up any other window. So for instance, right now we have a timeline down here. Well, I don't have any animation, so I don't really care about having a timeline. So one thing I could do is click on this, and I could change it to something that I want, like a shader editor. So I could say, okay, well, I want to see the material of this, so I want to mess with the material, so I'll keep this as my shader editor down here, and then I can drag this up or down as I want to. The other thing that you can do to customize your own space is, if you hover over any of the corners, you get this little cursor, and if you click and drag, for instance, I just clicked and dragged up, it made a new window for me. And I could do the same thing dragging left, click and drag left, it made me a new window that way. And again, I can set these up to be whatever I want them to be. And then to collapse them, I can click on that, see that little cursor, click and then drag to the right, and it'll get rid of it. Click here, drag down to get rid of it. Click here, drag up to get rid of that. And you do the same thing. Now, if there are two, right now there's two over here, so it won't let me collapse to the right. I would have to get rid of these and then collapse to the right if I wanted to get rid of it. So now I have just one window, and this is definitely one way. I'm going to go click up here down to 3D viewport, and this is a you'll see when you're watching something, this is one way a lot of people like to work. They like to have at least one workspace that's just one window. So I do too. I like that. So yeah, if you want this, you can save this now sort of as your default layout, go up here, defaults, save startup file, and the next time you open it, it'll open up to here. So, and again, you could add another one, general layout, and then this layout, you could customize it to be different. You can go back to the sort of original way of doing it, and I recommend when you're just getting started that you do sort of get a grasp of this concept right here. I know it's very basic, but you can get, I think that, you know, depending on what you do and as you learn how to do different things in Blender, it helps to be able to customize your workspace as much as you can. And I know it's one of those things I struggled with for a long time, like figuring out how to, I kept forgetting about this. Oh, I got to click here and then I got to drag it down. And at first it's frustrating, but after you've used it and you've gotten used to it, it's I actually really prefer it. I wish other programs would do something similar. So anyway, that's the basics of setting up your windows here. Okay, I turned off my keyboard and my mouse so you could see this down here. The very bottom of your screen, you have some tips and some hints for you. So if you see here, this is the mouse, the left click, drag, middle mouse, right click. So left click selects, left click drag, box selects, middle mouse rotates view, right click opens up the context menu. And if you hold down any of the keys, so like if you hold down Alt, it'll give you the other options you have. If you hold down Control, it'll show you what options you have. Shift, it'll show you what options you have. And anytime you enter a modal, which is like a special mode, so I push G, that's going to grab this cube and move it around. If you look at that bottom tab there, you see you have all these different options. So that's going to be very helpful as you're getting started with Blender. Even after you're very comfortable with Blender, it's still very, very helpful because there's a lot of stuff here. Like I actually just learned about this axis. I didn't even know that you could click on the middle mouse and then just drag it to whatever axis you want visually, and then it'll just snap to that axis, which I think is very interesting. And I got that by looking down here. So yeah, I'm going to try not to get into 3D viewport stuff. All right, so let's see what else do we got here. So I'm gonna drag out another window over here. I'm gonna drag one up here just to sort of prove a point here. Go to properties over here, an outliner over here. If you hover over any window, there's a shortcut to make it to maximize it, and that's Control+Spacebar. So Control+Spacebar to maximize and to minimize. You can also, I think you can do right click maximize area, but yeah, that's one of those shortcuts you probably should just memorize. Do Control+Spacebar, 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 and then you can maximize whatever area you're working in. This becomes really useful for a lot of reasons. Sometimes you have a lot of text and it's just useful to see it in a full screen, and obviously if you're working in 3D viewport, that can be really helpful as well. So Control+Spacebar, commit it to memory, remember it, learn it. One thing I want to mention is if you go to Window, you can open New Window, and this new window you can see is a copy of this other one, and there's no tabs at the top. So I can change this, but there are no tabs at the top. And you can also do Window, New Main Window, and then that has tabs, and you can do anything you want. So this is really useful with if you have two monitors, that can be really useful. Another thing that's interesting about Blender's interface is if you have a panel like this, you can click on Control and middle mouse to zoom this in or out, to make this bigger or smaller. And as far as I know, that's the only way that you can make it bigger or smaller. You have numbers like this. You can click and drag down to select all three of these, and then you could push 5, and it'll scale them all, or it'll move them all at 5 meters. Same thing, you could hover over those and push backspace, enter, and then it'll go back to the defaults. You can also do math here, so if you wanted to move this over 5 meters, and then you wanted to move it over another 5 meters, you could do 5 plus 5. So this comes in really handy, for instance, if you're changing resolution. Now one thing you could do here for resolution is you could actually just, if you wanted this to be half the size, you can just go 50 right here, and even though it says 1920 by 1080, it'll render half of this. But if you're creating a texture or something, you might still need to do the math. And this is where it's helpful. If you say, you know what, I want this to be half of 1920, you can just do \2 and then enter to get divided by 2. And you can do *4 to do ×4. Another thing that's great about Blender's user interface is that you can cancel things in the middle of an operation. So for instance, if I take this cube and I left click and I drag it, if I don't want to, let's say I'm moving it over here and then I realize, you know what, I don't actually want to move it. I'm still holding down the left mouse. If I push escape, it'll go back to where it was. This is true for other things too. If I do Shift D, that duplicates an object. Now I don't have to hold down the left mouse and it'll just move with it. But let's say I want this to be in the exact same location. Well, I can do escape, or I could do right mouse. If I push the right mouse, it'll also just go back to the original location. If you look at the bottom, you can see some hints on what you can do. So I'm clicking and holding down the left mouse button, and I can push the right mouse button to cancel. If I push X, it'll go only on the X-axis. Y will go only on the Y-axis. Z will go only on the Z-axis. C will clear the restraint. So if I pushed X and then C, I can go back to not being on the X-axis. I can also push X again to clear it. And if you push the other keys to scale or rotate, it'll just switch to that one instead of moving. In Blender you also have gizmos. So if by default they're not on, if you choose one of these tools on the sidebar here, so this is the move tool, rotate, scale, and then this one is transform. Transform has basically all of those in one. I'm just going to go to the move for now. Then you can click on the green arrow to move on the Z-axis, X to move on the X-axis, green to move on the Y-axis. If you grab in the middle, you can free move, and it might be a little difficult with your mouse, but if you push the middle mouse, it'll constrain it to whatever axis you're closest to. Or if you hold it down, you can move it around as well. If you look at rotate, same thing. If you grab it on this white one, it'll do a free rotate. If you grab on the blue one, it'll rotate along the Z-axis, Y-axis on the green. Scale, same thing. So you can scale along specific axes. And then transform, you have all those tools in one, which sometimes can be helpful, but a lot of times it can just be confusing. It depends on how you work, really, but you can click to move it up, or you can rotate it, or you can scale. I highly recommend you use the gizmo as little as possible. It's a lot first it's weird, but it's a lot faster to just use the keyboard shortcuts, G, S, and R, and then constrain it to a specific axis if you want that. Grab Z up. And don't worry too much about keyboard shortcuts right now, because I have some information that might be helpful as you get started, and I'll have a video about that real soon. So Blender also has pie menus. So if you push Z, it'll open up a pie menu, or the tilde key will open up a different pie menu, or Shift S opens up a pie menu. And the way that these pie menus work is if you push Z, for instance, if you just click it once, it'll hold up, and I don't have to hold down Z, and I can move to whichever mode I want. In this menu, it's do I want to switch to solid view, rendered view, or material preview. The other way you can do it is if you hold down Z and then you release it. So you hold down Z, you drag your mouse over. I don't have to click anything, I just release. it'll do it there. And if you do it very fast, so if you do Z up, Z down, Z right, Z left, that's also a way, and as you get used to things, that's probably the way you're going to work with a lot of these. So, and same with the tilde key. I actually don't use this a lot because I use the number pad to do all these. But especially if you're on a laptop and you don't have a number pad for some reason, I imagine this tilde key would be really helpful because you can do tilde and then top, tilde, bottom, left, right, and then obviously it's really intuitive just to go tilde up, tilde down, tilde right, tilde left. Another thing about the user experience is you can click and drag colors over. So if I wanted to make this blue, I can grab onto the blue and bring it over to the other one. And this is really helpful when you're trying to copy one color from another color. And also, the same keys that work in the 3D view also work in 2D view and basically across everything. If you push G, it will move. R is rotate. S for scale. And I could also, while I'm moving, I could push right click to cancel or escape to cancel. And then we have the help button. So if you click on help, you can go straight to the tutorials, support, user communities, developers teach, blah, blah, blah. So you can find some help here. So once you have the setup that you like, remember you can always go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File, and this also goes with objects. So I could add a monkey, and I could give this monkey a material, and I can make this monkey purple and metal, and I could change the viewport to rendered, and I could change the style to cycles, and then I can zoom in, and if I go to File, Save Startup File, and I open up a new project, I have my purple monkey. So this can be great, especially if you do the same type of work over and over and over again. It's great to set up sort of a 3-point lighting system and a world and a plane and sort of, whatever you think you're going to need the most of. You can have a default workspace that works for you. So I highly recommend once you find a workspace that works that you save it as the default, because it's a lot better to open up and already be 10 minutes into your project as opposed to starting over and doing what pretty much everybody does, which is you start a project and you click the cube, you delete the cube, and then you go, oh, I want to make something, and you go, oh, I guess I need that cube back. Anyway, I hope this tutorial was helpful, and I promise we're going to be getting into a lot more fun stuff very soon. I'll leave you with something fun. If you click on this cube here and you go up to Object and you go down to Quick Effects, you can do a quick liquid, and if I push play, you can see we just created some really interesting fluid simulation. In one of the next videos, we're going to be talking about navigation, and it's a very, very, very important topic. And the one thing I don't really like about Blender is the G for move, S for scale, and R for rotate. It's actually very intuitive and very easy, but if you use any program besides Blender, it's basically just confusing. And I think that most people will use other programs besides Blender. For me, it's Unity and Unreal. For other people, it's also Maya, it's also Substance Designer and everything else. And WER is the standard, and I think it should be the standard for Blender. So, and I have been customizing what I think is probably the best of both worlds, because you don't want to have a completely customized key map, because then any YouTube tutorial you watch besides mine is going to be completely useless for you, because they're going to use all these keyboard shortcuts that you don't have access to. So basically what I've been working on is coming up with a key map and a few options that you can do WER, but pretty much everything else, as much else, stays the same as possible. I also have my own navigation for moving with right-click WASD, and I think that's also something that's really, really helpful, especially, again, if you're using Unity or Unreal or any of these other projects. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and let me know if you have any questions.